Hi, this is Kevin Burke of Rachel's Vineyard. Welcome to Oceans of Mercy. Today, friends, we're blessed to have EILEEN Kuhlmann as our guest, and she's going to share with us how she went from a life where she was a chemical engineer and a mom to serving in the Respect Life ministry of the Diocese of Dallas with a special calling to reach out to those hurting after abortion. EILEEN, welcome to Oceans of Mercy.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Kevin.
So if you could tell us a bit of your story that led you from a profession as a chemical engineer, full-time mom, and somehow finding your way to a very special pro-life vocation within your diocese.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I think very much it was God's calling. I didn't know that at the time. But in the world of engineering, I was in adhesives. So if you think about it, adhesives, the bonds of adhesives are what are important. And as I transitioned through the birth of our wonderful daughter and being really involved in all the schools, and then, okay, now the schools don't want mom around so much. Now what am I going to do? I realized that God was calling me to a different kind of bond, a different kind, the bonds of healing. But this time it was his bonds of healing. And I still didn't really know what that was. I knew that the pro-life group here, the Catholic pro-life community, needed a director for healing after abortion. We had always been involved with pro-life in the parish and all those wonderful things that we do. I don't think I really knew what I was walking into. I knew, of course, that abortion existed. I knew all that we all know. And when I walked into that ministry as an engineer, I think God needed an engineer to show up because there was a little bit of a disorganization going on within healing after abortion. We only had 7 volunteers. No one really knew which way to walk at that point. So thanks be to God, we now have over 70. 12 years later, we have over 70 volunteers, and we have teams of everything. So we have teams of drivers and teams of seamstress people, and teams that the wonderful retreat teams themselves, which include 2 mental health professionals on each retreat. So I have, I think it's 18 therapists that are actively involved in the ministry, as well as a large referral list to go to more. And then we have clergy on every retreat. So having them present is just vital. So we have a team of 10. So that's been very important.
That's amazing. It's so wonderful to hear what fertile soil it's been for, particularly 70 volunteers. Wow. So let's help our viewers understand how you became introduced to Rachel's Vineyard. If you could kind of give us a little bit of that experience, your experience of the first retreat, and then, we'll take it from there.
Yes, I'm the biggest fan of Rachel's Vineyard. Just recently, I was in a group of healers from across the country, and there weren't a lot of us there that were coming from the world of Rachel's Vineyard. And I just let them know that there is no better model. There is no better model. And the therapists that serve on our retreat will tell us that it's like 3 months of healing in a weekend. They walk away in awe. We have rookie therapists that come on and associates as well, and they're just in awe of what Rachel's Vineyard can offer. And what is so beautiful about it is so complete. It uses all your senses, your ability to smell and to touch and to hear and to feel. And so you're not just there listening to some really good advice, sharing a little bit of your pain and walking out the door. You live the entire process. You're touching something, you're holding something, you're living something as you become free of the burden that you have inside to open yourself up to healing. So, and I also love how the teams themselves, the team that serves at my side, are people that have been there. So the people have been through their own healing. There's no one better than that group of people to be able to listen to those who come. And then our therapists and deacons who so lovingly share their vision to help the people see how maybe there's a different way to look at this and how you're seeing yourself. So the retreat is so complete itself. Teresa did an amazing job. And I hear that so much from people that come for the first time. And then to see our team so lovingly step up and serve on the retreat and watch that transformation from darkness and death to life.
Did it change your understanding that you may have come with from observing those who have experienced abortion in their lives? Did that begin to, maybe open up new understandings, or maybe even perhaps change your understanding of that issue?
Absolutely, in so many ways. I'll have to say first and foremost that my team, my inner core team, those ladies are my model, my mentors that I follow, and showing how they were able to open themselves to healing in a way that maybe I haven't actually been able to do myself. So I have admiration for people that have gone through an abortion and that are able to say, this is as far as I can get. I need help. And so that's what these people have done. Also, I think I came in with a textbook understanding of what abortion was. We speak in parishes, and I still hear people say, oh, that's a beautiful story. I would never actually do that. Well, that's painful for me to hear, because we all abort God one way or another in our daily life. And it just happens that this is a different form, and in a very, very, very painful and yes, a very painful way to abort God. But what I help people understand when I give presentations on this is that there's always a very painful story that goes with that abortion story. So we can't look at it as just black and white of, how could you have done that? No, you have to walk back and get in her shoes, get in his shoes, and look at the complete story. So when I answer the phone, that's one of the first things that you'll hear me say is, tell me about what was going on in those days. I want to understand what you were facing that led you to that decision.
And that may be one of the first times, Eileen, that they've been asked that question, don't you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And I think that many times they're hesitant to share because they still are going to feel that I'm going to say, oh, well, you could have chosen something else. No, I'm going to say, I'm so sorry that you were feeling that way, that you didn't have support, that you couldn't see any other options. That must have been so difficult for you.
That first contact is probably really important, I would think. It must be very rewarding for you to shepherd people from that initial contact to something like a retreat where you're kind of I think of Teresa talks about this when she presents is lower. It's like, and the series The Chosen had a beautiful episode where they lowered the paralytic person.
Yes.
Or the person injured by a fall. I forget their actual injury or whether it was from birth, but they lowered them through Peter's mother-in-law's home, I think.
That was amazing.
Took the roof off. But I think of a lot of our facilitators like yourself who are making those initial contacts is kind of like that.
Oh, it is. And it's such a personal and intimate interaction. You can't be involved in anything else. When you're in that interaction, in that moment, it is sacred ground, because they are sharing, and they don't always want to share everything in the beginning, but once you gain their trust, they share more. But what I've learned is they have already felt socially aborted long before the abortion decision, due to feeling pressured, or that they had no other options, or that someone was going to punish them or kick them out of their home. There were so many difficult things they were facing that they were already feeling lost before they walked in that door.
That, of course, predisposes them to trauma, doesn't it? The fact that they felt a sense of whatever degree, and of course, there's a continuum of feeling a sense of fear, pressure, coercion, up until even violence and stuff like that,
Yes. And so even though I'm speaking in many pro-life groups, and I think they expect me to give a different kind of presentation, I start there. I say, okay, we're going to talk about how a person may feel after an abortion. But before we do that, we're going to walk backwards. And I want you to step into her shoes. I want you to feel compassion for her story, with no judgment, with no condemnation. And then we will move forward and see if you can feel a little bit of what she might have felt afterwards, and then we'll talk about healing. I really want them to walk the entire gamut. And I see the surprised looks in the room, like, wait a minute, we're a pro-life group, and so we need to believe this. No, you need to have compassion for the story. And that doesn't mean that we condone. It just means that we need to understand and feel, so we can walk with the person and shine maybe our own light on the ground until that person can see their own light and God's light.
It makes sense. I think of the one of the first living scripture exercises that folks go through on Friday is the woman caught in adultery, right? So that's what struck me in what you were sharing with that group, and the importance of the story, because the story hopefully will get us to the place where we can stop looking with condemnation with our rocks in our hand, and realize that we all, carry that rock, and we all need the forgiveness of Jesus. So you mentioned, women coming through the retreat, and I think what's one of the unique things about Rachel's Vineyard, and to be honest with you, in the initial stages of the ministry, this was misunderstood, and I would say mistrusted, and often within the church. And I understand that, But at the same time, there was a sense of mistrust about including men along with women in the healing journey. So I'd like to hear your experience of having men on the retreat. What were the contexts? If you could share a few stories, that would be welcome as well, you know.
Yes, and you have to keep in mind where I was coming from, that I really didn't know much about anything on this. But when I would see the women on retreat and they would tell the stories, and I would hear about the men in the stories, I started wondering, why are the men not here? So it was all about women in the beginning. And I've had strong pro-life group leaders come up to me and say, it should only be for women. This is the sin of women. And I always say, well, how do you think the baby got made? There were two, and God. And so if one gets to heal, why would you take it away from the other?
True.
So yes, absolutely. We began to invite the men. So on every phone call with me, I would ask, is there a man still in the story? So if there was, great. If there was maybe someone that married into the story, does he know what you've gone through? Great. So I would start working the men involved in the story, if they knew about it, to come on retreat. And then all of a sudden that started growing and growing. And we had single men coming on retreat. We had grandfathers coming on retreat that their daughter didn't want to come, but they wanted to come and memorialize their grandchild.
Wow.
That they forced the abortion on their own daughter. So we just kept opening and opening. And then I really started working on couples because I have been in so many weddings. I've got one coming up that I'm in of our people that come off of retreat and they have their marriages blessed in the church. So when the couples come, I always tell them your marriage will be blessed, because whether or not your dad, if you're here just to support her, you're going to understand her pain better. You're going to understand her healing and be able to support her. That will draw you closer. If you are dad, I'm glad you're here. So I have seen those marriages. I've seen them come in where they can't even look at each other. They're looking in opposite directions, and how we work them during the retreat where they'll tell their story or they'll tell their pain, and I'll say, look at him and tell him how you feel. And so we try to draw them together. And the blessings have been just huge in the arena of couples. So I've even been tempted to have a Rachel's Vineyard retreat just for couples. That's still kind of on
That's
a burner.
interesting. Yeah.
We welcome people from age, now we've gone as low as 15 with guardian, with paperwork, with all the things that we do for safe environment, but we as low as 15 all the way up to 85. So sometimes God is the one that packages who's coming on each retreat. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know what you're doing, because I'll see the 15-year-old and I'll see the 85-year-old, but then they'll come on retreat and the 85-year-old will be listening and she'll say, you didn't have a mom to go to. I want to be that mom for you today. I want to adopt you spiritually. And so God knows what he's doing in packaging a retreat. Yes, the men need to be there. I've had men get on their knees in front of a woman after hearing the story and saying, on behalf of all the men that have harmed you and hurt you, I ask your forgiveness. Now, for her to have a face in front of her that is saying, I'm so sorry, even though he was not the one, that is a depth of healing that is not in my manual. So that I need those men there. And it goes the other way. Women talking to the men that are on retreat. In the beginning, we did have women saying, what is he doing here? This is for us. And I always say, give me 30 minutes and you'll figure it out. And it just happens. Usually the men are the ones that are crying more intensely. So we want them.
It points to the fact that something I often say and write about is that, those that support abortion rights and reproductive rights, as they call it, like to talk about this as a private, confidential healthcare decision. But I think the more you do this work, the more you see that it's very much a wounded relationship. And the initial fear of, for instance, understandable fear of women who have been hurt by men and who have had abortions, saying, what are they doing here? It's right away telling you that they've been wounded by men. There's fear and there's distrust.
Absolutely.
And, the relationship between the mother and father and child, the relationship between the couple. I guess one of the things I wanted to check with you too, you kind of back up just a little bit, is when a couple, whether they stay together or whether, which is most common, the relationship ends after the abortion. When you were hearing the stories, are there things that strike you about how the abortion impacts their future relationships, in terms of communication or sexual relationships? Anything that comes to mind you could share with our viewers?
Absolutely. And you mentioned something very important, and that is the trauma that I'm talking about the women now that have been through and very greatly harmed by men. And I remember leaning over to one of the therapists and saying, I haven't heard any abortion stories today. I'm only hearing all the other trauma, all the other pain that they've been through. And she said, what do you think this is about? Abortion comes as a consequence from all that they have been through. It is born in the nest of despair. So these people, these beautiful women, have been harmed greatly. Incest, rape, abuse, all these stories that I've heard over and over and over again, they come with such an anger towards men. So it is, they are, many of them still either in that relationship or in a new one. And that man is now wondering, what on earth is going on in my marriage that this woman is so greatly harmed by other men that I'm affected, and I had nothing to do with it. So that is why we want them on retreat as well. We want them to be able, and we separate at the time of stories, and we want them to be free with a therapist in each group for him to say, I don't get it. I don't know why she hates me so much, or we're
where's all that anger coming from?
Yeah. Right. So we're able to work them separately and then bring them back together, both during anger and stories. And so that just gives such healing to the marriage. But there is no way a woman is going to be able to be damaged so greatly and have abortions and still have a beautiful relationship with current relationship if the healing does not set in on all those other stories.
Let me ask you a question, because this is something I think about. You mentioned many of the, and tell me if this is accurate, that many of the stories not only reflect abortion loss, but oftentimes that's flowing from other areas of abuse or trauma they've had in their lives. Sometimes I think that other pain makes them so desperate at some point in their life, because it's such accumulation of trauma that when they're desperate to reach out for some help, and it might make them more open to something like Rachel's Vineyard. Whereas we have a whole population of women who may not have that trauma in their background. So that, let's take, for example, a woman in nursing school. She has the abortion. She doesn't have previous trauma. So she then is able to kind of pull it together, stuff that down, and continue to focus on her career pursuits. I think we have a lot of women out there that maybe are high functioning and more walking wounded. And this is very true of men as well. Absolutely, of men as well. But does that make sense to you, that we, and we still need to reach out to them and get them on these retreats because it's still impacting their life. But I wonder if they're maybe a little more defended because they have success. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. And we certainly, in our intake process, we're not, you must have trauma in order to attend. No, I'll have to say that if I had to give a statistic, maybe I would say that maybe 2/3 of the time there is. But of course, we have all the stories like you just described, and even marriages that are a very happy marriage, and they say, we just can't afford another child. Let's have an abortion. So there's no trauma there. There's just a sad decision. So we do get those. Absolutely. We want them on retreat. I find that the denial is more intense over there because, as you said, with those that have been through trauma, even though they do become numb from so much pain and so much loss and so much, well, I guess I can survive another one, so there's just so much stacked one on top of the other. The glass gets full and they just can't handle anything more. And that does, I feel, opens them up more to, please help me. I don't know what I need, but I've got to get this out of me. That denial breaks. But the other side of the story that you talked about, the ones where there is no trauma, and especially those that are more professional, we as professionals, we're very good at stuffing down whatever we have to stuff down in order to remain professional and keep going and give them that mask of a smile and do what we need to do every day. But what happens, denial is a monster. And it will break when it wants to break. And that may be when you're in the middle of a grocery store. It has no time other than God's time and your time. And so when that denial breaks, even that person that has had no trauma is going to say, wait a minute, I don't know why I feel so bad.
Sometimes, as Teresa's written, it could be the death of a pet or the death of a parent. Something that connects to that deeply buried grief. And I also wanted to touch on something that I think you've experienced in your ministry, which is that we're approaching nearly half of all abortion procedures are chemical abortions, RU 486. This is higher in some places in Europe, sometimes 85%. But here I think we're about 40, approaching probably on our way to 50% of all procedures are the abortion pill, where folks are. And now they can get these pills by mail and go through that abortion process in their home. If you could share with our viewers, if you've seen some of these cases on the retreats and perhaps what's unique to their stories, that would be helpful.
Yes, and here in Texas, here in Dallas, we just had one of those abortion centers open up where it's just chemical abortion. So that's something we're very proactive in facing them. But also in Texas, I was just talking to some people about this yesterday. We do have protection where they cannot receive things in the mail in Texas. And people are going across the border to get what they need to Oklahoma, Arizona, whatever, New Mexico, Louisiana. So nothing's going to stop someone if they really want to continue forward. But as far as what we're seeing, I'll have to say it snuck up on me before I knew it was happening, because I had a person on retreat, and as I was doing the intake, she was talking about how she was working nonstop. And so I said, well, tell me more about that. Why are you working so much? Why so many hours? You have a family. And she just kept talking. And finally, she said, well, the abortion was in my bathroom. And then I realized, oh my gosh, this is a whole new approach for me. So I thought I could really relate to her pain of not wanting to come home, and I have to use that bathroom, and my kids are in that bathroom, and I shower in that bathroom. But that's where it all happened, and she saw the child. So the intensity that, and I was talking to our mental health group yesterday, saying we need to be more proactive here. We need more education here, because what I see is the fact that she sometimes very likely will see the child, that she will have to live in that home with her family in that home. And there's really no one to blame. And no, he didn't drive me. He didn't put me on the table to do it. I did, so there's many more fingers turning towards the woman saying, I did this. I swallowed it on my own. I did it in my own bathroom. I didn't even tell anyone about it. So there's no one else to blame. So there's the shame I'm seeing is much more intense. The inability to forgive herself is much more intense. So some of the mental health people are starting to respond. And I love one of the ideas. The deacons are saying the thing that we should offer is to bless the home.
That's a really, really good point. Right. Yes.
So, and since we have 10 deacons on board and a couple priests, well, even our bishop is a team member. Bishop Kelly loves Rachel's Vineyard, and he was on 3 times last year. He's already signed up for one this time. So they can bless the home, and the person will feel so different about that. But I love what one of the therapists offered. She said, what about redecorating the bathroom? And I thought, that's great. That is great. Getting the person more involved, whether or not they want the child's image or memory in that decoration in a discreet way that would help her or not. We kind of feel that out, but make it all brand new. And so these people are coming on our retreats, and the retreat will do its beauty that it always does with God's grace working through it. But I think these particular people going home to the home where it happened, it's not going to be good enough for us to just say, okay, our support system after retreat should do it. That's enough. It's not going to be enough. We need mental health support.
You're really raising some good issues. I don't know if this is the engineering background of yours, but I love the very practical ways you're trying to respond and problem solve and use your team. And this is the beauty of the ministry and of the body of Christ. I think you touched on some really important points. One is that the woman, in a sense, not only has the burden of the unplanned pregnancy, she has the burden of becoming her own abortionist in these chemical abortions. The home becomes the abortion center. So it makes total sense that there would be such traumas and triggers right there in our home. But I love some of the ways you're thinking creatively. Make sure that as you go through that and begin to develop these ideas, that you share that with all of us and with the whole ministry, because I think these are really important. And I would want to, maybe have another program about that and write about it and some of the ways that I am able to share that. I think that's such important information for all folks who are involved in this, particularly as the numbers increase, Eileen,
Yes, and I did check with my English-speaking team, and I said, I've only had one that I know of, but maybe I wasn't paying attention. And they said, no, we've had 3 or 4. So it's growing, it's growing. Now, one thing that they had is they had a young one where the young one was forced to swallow the pill. And she said, that is a whole level of abuse on top of everything you just said. Sure. So there's so much more to focus on. The retreat is wonderful, and we're going to have a whole other system behind that for those that have had their abortion at home.
Now, you've also had a very beautiful fruit of your ministry as you've provided service to men who've done beautifully on your Rachel's Vineyard retreats. You have a beautiful sensitivity to couples, and from the very beginning of your intake process, which I really affirm and so glad to hear. But you've also received a calling to have a men's only program. Could you tell us a little bit about, in the next 5 minutes or so, how, we could begin, because we can always revisit these things.
Okay. Yes. Project Joseph was born in 2014, and I was not the one that wanted it to happen, because I said, the men are on Rachel's Vineyard. I see them cry. I see them smile. They're good. They're going out the door. And the men said, no, we need more. We need to be with just men. And I said, what? Men with just men? I don't get that. And I said, okay, fine. I'm a former engineer. I will create this and I'll prove you wrong. So we created Project Joseph based on the prodigal son, with male therapists and deacons, and the whole team of men that had been through Rachel's Vineyard became the Project Joseph team. And I was at the door to say, you don't need it. And they said, we need it. So this Project Joseph, I spend more time now on Project Joseph than I do in Rachel's Vineyard. They're growing. We have English and Spanish. Their teams are big, and they need to do something. Men don't suffer the loss and go through their healing in the same way a woman does. And I finally had to understand that. So Rachel's Vineyard opens everything up, and they don't want to have to deal with that vulnerability with women thing. So after they have finished Rachel's Vineyard, many times they'll go on to step 2, where they can be just with guys and share what it is that they need to say with just guys listening that get it, and then go through the prodigal son process and become the man God created them to be. So it's
so this gives them the option of either, an additional layer of healing for men after the Rachel's Vineyard retreat, which is beautiful. But they can also come as a standalone event. They can just attend. And I guess
absolutely. Yeah, there are men that do not want to be anywhere there are women healing. There are men that want to dedicate their lives to help women that they have harmed. So we've had people donate back to Rachel's Vineyard saying, I want to provide for all those that need the funds to go. So every man is in a different place. We have Mr. Reg Platt to handle that for us now. And then our Spanish speakers have their own team. So yes, we respect whatever he chooses. Now, if he is coming into Rachel's Vineyard, I will always tell them there's 2 steps for you, 2 blessings for you, because you're the head of the household. God wants 2 things for you. And they like that. They like to know that they get a little bit more. So they get both of them.
And I guess some men will come through Project Joseph and perhaps consider a Rachel's Vineyard retreat with a spouse, maybe at a later time or something. Yeah.
Yes, we have a Rachel's Vineyard. We go to both ways. We have our Rachel's Vineyard flyer inside of every folder that the man gets, and the facilitator is trained to say, based on your story, have you and your wife considered going on Rachel's Vineyard? Or maybe if you would like her to go and you just come with her. So yes, we do have an open door that swings both ways.
Have you been able to see the fruit of, because I think this is such a huge need. I'm sure you do as well. In that, when you have your deacons and priests who are involved with your ministry and serving, do you think that helps them in their preaching? And being able to, because I think a lot of clergy and priests, and understandably so, sometimes they're sensitive about talking about this issue from the pulpit because they may fear that it's so sensitive. I don't want to hurt people who have had abortions. It's too private an issue. But I think our people need to be hearing the message of not only the pro-life message, but the message of healing as well.
Yes, we have very brave priests here that I try to do 2 or 3 AMBO testimonial weekends a year in a non-COVID year, where we will go to all their masses the whole weekend, and I will take a testimonial with me who will share his or her. One time I had all guys, and I was like, what is this? These are all men sharing their stories in front of full congregations. I have so much admiration for them. But they come and they share their story in a minute or 2 from the AMBO, and you see the tears on the faces of people listening. So we do have our clergy preaching on them. Our deacons go back and preach on it. Our deacon on our last Rachel retreat said, my life has been profoundly changed by this last retreat. So, and our bishop, he goes and he gets in front of the whole diocese and he'll preach on Rachel's Vineyard. So it absolutely changes them. How can it not? Each retreat changes me as a woman, as a mother, as a wife. So it is definitely something that can touch our souls and our hearts.
Has your bishop experienced a retreat, or is he coming from the perspective of just seeing the fruits, which is fine either way, of course?
Well, he had, I think his story is that he had, there were many losses. His mother had many losses. and he was a live baby that was born after many losses. And so the miscarriages in that family touched him profoundly. But we had 2 other bishops behind him that were also very involved with us. But during my time here, Bishop Kelly loves being a team member. We just keep his badge ready.
Awesome.
And every year I ask him what he would like to do. And I always think he'll be too busy. And he signed up for 3, and he did 2 Project Josephs as well last year. So then he'll go and in turn, he'll preach on it. People will say, hey, turn on your whatever. Bishop Kelly's talking about your Rachel and Joseph retreat.
You realize how blessed you are.
He loves what we do. He is a very healing priest. He loves to be just father.
What a blessing.
To these people.
What a blessing to your ministry and to your diocese to have that spiritual fatherhood and leadership from Bishop Kelly all the way down. But of course, it must be quite rewarding to have responded in your life, as chemical engineer. But you see the Lord using the gifts that you brought into your calling. And then what beautiful fruit that has come in your diocese. It's just what a joy, what a blessing to hear of that fruit. And of course, this is something Jesus promised us when we open our hearts and our minds and our spirits to his will. If folks want to get in touch with you, whether they're folks in post-abortion, after-abortion ministry, working in dioceses or other Christian churches, perhaps they're people that are hurting and are in your vicinity and want to learn more, what's the best, easiest way for them to get in touch with you? And we'll probably put that up on the screen too.
Well, easiest way is to go to our websites because all our phone numbers are there. We handle everything bilingual, English and Spanish, for both men and for the women and men. So racheldallas.org is our website for the women and men, and then projectjosephdallas.org for just the men. And I'll have to say, Kevin, we would definitely have a healing ministry here because we have a wonderful diocese that offers that, but we would not have the intensity and the profound beauty of a healing retreat if it weren't for you and Teresa for having created Rachel's Vineyard. So I thank you. I mean, there are people in each retreat, the therapists especially, they say, please thank Teresa for doing this, and you. So thank you for everything that you have done to give us the tools that we need to help others.
As soon as I'm finished, I'm going to share that with Teresa. All right.
Good.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. What a blessing. I really appreciate it, Eileen.
It was an honor and a privilege. Thank you, Kevin. Have a great day.
Well, friends, that was a beautiful message of healing. Just shows you the fruits when we open our hearts and our spirits to repentance and to healing. Remember, you can go to abortionforgiveness.com. If anyone you know or love has been impacted by abortion, perhaps you were involved in an abortion decision yourself personally, help facilitate one, know someone who has, or a grandparent touched by abortion, man or woman, you are welcome on Rachel's Vineyard and on many other types of healing ministries. God bless you, friends.